What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Blackheart Productions. Today we're gonna do a video about we're gonna do a breakdown video of Friday the 13th, The Legend of Jason Voorhees, which is a short story that I wrote. It's a 6-part story. If you're familiar with the channel, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Go check it out. It's on this channel here. It's an audiobook. Of course, I don't own the rights to Jason or the hockey mask or none of that. I'm just a nerd. But I love Jason so much that I wanted to write my own revision of an original origin of the Friday the 13th. Not necessarily the origin. I guess that would be like Pamela's story, which is Jason's mother, which we're going to get into it, but I only dive into that in the introduction of the story. The story is all Jason. It's all Jason. So yeah, let's go straight into the introduction, which is 1965. We find Sarah Cunningham sleeping on a rock, and it's nighttime. And she had fallen asleep there earlier. She was just kind of getting away from all her drunk friends because they've been, just being annoying to her, I guess you could say. So she went down to the beach or whatever, not the beach, but the lake shore side, and decided to read her book, and she ended up passing out, which she strangely doesn't remember. So she wakes up, and she doesn't remember falling asleep, and she just gets this real strange, uneasy feeling. So she decides to go back up to the cabin, where she finds all the lights are off, all the lights are still on, which she thought was normal. So she goes into the cabins, and no one's around, and there's no noise going on, which is not normal. So at this point, she grows even more scared and uneasy, and she's like, what the fuck is going on? And then suddenly the lights go out, all the power shuts off. And when this happens, she starts calling out for her friends, telling them to quit fucking with her. She's thinking it's a joke, and it's obviously not a joke. Eventually she makes her way down the hall, and the lights are still shut off at this point, and she makes her way to the first bedroom, where she finds 2 of her friends dead, and covered in blood, whatever. And then after that, the only thing that reveals this image to her is the flashes of lightning, and it's her 2 friends sort of piled on top of one another, covered in blood. So she sees a glimpse of that through the flash of lightning, and then she goes to the next room, and now she's looking for her other friend, which is basically her boyfriend, Daniel. And she goes to the bathroom, and she finds that the mirror's been all smashed out, whatever, and she sees that was obviously his face smashed into it, because he's laying on the floor with shards of glass in his face. And now we hear a voice from the living room. It's Pamela Voorhees. She tells Sarah that she's the last one, and she needs to be punished for what she did. Sarah doesn't know what Pamela is talking about, obviously, and she's crying and freaking out and all that. And Pamela charges at her with a machete, telling her she's gonna get revenge for her son. So Sarah runs into the bedroom, locks the door behind her, throws a lamp through the window, cuts herself up with the glass and shit as she's jumping out the window, and she just starts running into the woods. Now, when she starts running into the woods, she has no idea where she's going, but she eventually makes it back down to the beach, where she runs right into Pamela, who is crazed and pissed off and fucking charging at her with this big ass machete. Now, Sarah dodges she dodges a swing, and picks up a rock and throws it at Pamela's head, and it busts her head open. It starts to cover her face in blood. So she drops the machete in the sand, which gives Sarah the opportunity to pick it up. And if you know the Friday the 13th story, you know exactly what happens. Sarah picks up the machete and swipes her fucking head off with it. And quick little fun fact, I guess you could say. The reason I named the character Sarah Cunningham is because the original creator of Friday the 13th is Sean S. Cunningham, so I wanted to, you know, throw a little nod to the original creator in there. Anyway, so that's the introduction. Well, or Sarah, she kills Pamela, gets a huge a huge feeling of relief, and runs to the town, Forest Green, the nearest town, and then that's it. That's the introduction. So now we're on part 1, which is called The Legend. Now we're introduced to a young. Oh yeah, this is 1985, by the way. 20 years later, and I forgot to mention there's a little paragraph at the end of the introduction which briefly explains what happened. And what happened was Camp Crystal Lake gets shut down for good because of all the stuff that happened, which was Pamela killing all these teenagers in revenge of her son and then getting her head chopped off by the last survivor. That's the whole myth stuff. You know the story. We've all heard it before. So now we're in 1985. Now, first of all, I wanted to set this story in, like, right in the middle of the 80s because that's where, personally, I think Jason belongs. If I had the opportunity to make a Jason movie, I would definitely place it right in the middle of the 80s just because of the atmosphere, the music. It's just where Jason belongs. You know what I mean? It's like, same with Freddy. Like, Freddy belongs in the 80s, you know? That's why the 2010 remake didn't work, which I'm going to do a review on here soon. Anyway, so we're introduced to a young Tommy Jarvis, and again, if you know the series, you know that name. You'll hear a lot of names that I based characters off of, and I want everyone to know that I am planning this as a trilogy, so be expecting at least two more sequels of this specific Jason story. This Friday story is not the end, and you'll see. Well, I'm not going to say that, but in the first half, in the first story, we're introduced to a young Tommy Jarvis, and it's 1985. So he's exploring the abandoned Crystal Lake camp cabins, not quite over the property line, but he's like standing at this yellow tape caution taped off fucking gate, where he's just looking at the cabins, and he actually sees Jason right here in the like kind of standing in the trees behind the second cabin or the first cabin or something. He doesn't see Jason, but he just sees a like a nasty, veiny, gross looking hand kind of resting beside a standing leg, poking out of the trees. Obviously it's Jason, but as the reader, you don't know this yet. And by the way, spoiler alert, you know, I forgot to tell you guys at the beginning of the video, I'm sorry, but we're so far in the video, I don't want to go back, so I'm just going to tell you now. Spoiler alert, if you haven't listened to the story and you want to, then go listen to that and come back before I do the rest of the video. But if you've listened to the story, then I'm just breaking everything down, all the Easter eggs, shout outs to the original series, yada yada yada. So anyway, he sees Jason standing in the trees, and Tommy, the way it's explained is he's never explored this place before, but he's always wanted to because of all the stories that surround the place over the last 20 years with Jason and Pamela. No one ever saw Jason really much when he was a kid. Some people think he was never actually a real person that existed, things like that. And then Crazy Ralph shows up. Again, that's a name from the original series. He's just pretty much the same character in my version. Crazy Ralph is like the town freak, I guess you could say. He's fucking insane. And he believes that Jason is living in the camp still. He believes Jason never drowned, all that kind of shit. So he sees Tommy and he scares the shit out of him, and he tells him that he needs to go home and leave Jason alone. This is not where he should be. So Tommy runs off, scared, obviously. And then Crazy Ralph sees Jason standing in the trees as well, and he kind of whispers to himself, yeah, he don't want to be bothered. He don't want to be bothered. So after that, we cut to the next scene, I guess you could call it, which we're introduced to a car full of young adults, like 18, 19-year-olds who just graduated high school and they're off to college after the summer. Now, what they're doing for the summer, because, again, to this day right here, most of the story takes place on the same day, which is obviously June 13th, 1985, which is a Friday, by the way. Friday the 13th, obviously. So, you know, it's the summer. They want to come camp at Camp Crystal Lake because back in their town, they've heard all the legends, and, you know, it's a big mystery. It's like, it's out there, you know, it's a big legend. Everyone heard about it. Not everyone, but around the area. So, these kids are coming to explore the place, the legend, and they're kind of some cocky kids or whatever. They're kind of douchey assholes, most of them. So we got John, Jake, Brendan, Sam, and Sierra. Five kids in a car that come to Camp Crystal Lake. Perfect Jason story. So they pull up to a gas station in Forest Green, and then we're introduced to two more main characters, Ted and Derek, which are Forest Green locals, and Derek is actually the older brother of Tommy Jarvis, so his name's Derek Jarvis. Derek Jarvis was never an original character from the series. I created Derek Jarvis. I wanted Tommy to have, instead of a big sister, those of you who know, in Friday Part 4, he had his big sister Trish, I think her name was, but I wanted him to have kind of like a big tough big brother that would battle with him against Jason. So these kids pull up to the gas station, and Derek and Ted are standing out front. Now Derek is basically a greaser dude, you know, it's the 80s, whatever. He's fucking just got out of prison. He used to be in a gang, like a small little street gang, nothing too big, and he robbed a liquor store, got shot, and went to prison for it. Now Ted, there's really not much to backstory on him. He's just an African American, young, probably in his early 20s. Him and Derek are like best friends, and they just hang out, whatever, you know, and they kind of loiter in front of the gas station. So we see the five kids pull up, and Derek and Ted are standing out front, and we see Crazy Ralph come out of the trees. And Crazy Ralph goes up to Derek, and he tells him, you need to keep your brother away from that place. So, you know, but he's Crazy Ralph, so he's all kind of out there. He's like, you need to keep him away, Or, you know, fucking crazy old man. And so these city kids, I guess you'd call them, kind of start laughing and like poking fun at him or whatever. And one of them, Jake, I believe it was, comes up and he says, are you guys talking about Crystal Lake? And Crazy Ralph tells him, don't even think about it, stay out of there, whatever. And then Jake starts just being obnoxious, like, oh, look at this crazy old fucking man kind of thing, and pointing in his face and laughing at him. And so Crazy Ralph leaves. You know, he goes home. We don't see him for the rest of the story. Derek is a little offended. I think he just wanted to pick a fight. Honestly, I think Derek is a bit of just a firecracker anyway, you know. He loves to fight, whatever. So he says, who the fuck do you think you guys are? You city fuckers coming here and making fun of people just because they're crazy, you know. It's not right, whatever. And that may seem a little senseless, but to Derek, it's not. He just wanted to fight. So what he did was he picks up Jake and like slams him and punches him a couple times, whatever, and Jake's bleeding out of his nose and fucking oh well, Jake said fuck you to Derek, and that's what caused him to slam him on the ground, whatever. John runs out of the gas station, tries to stop it. Derek pulls out a switchblade and asks him if he wants some too. And, you know, he doesn't. He's like, we don't want no more trouble, none of that. So they all get in the car and leave and flip him off out the window. And Ted's you know, asking Derek, he's like, "You're fucking crazy, man. Like, you can't be out here doing this shit, beating people up and threatening to stab them, whatever." So now we see Tommy coming out of the trees, the same direction Ralph did. So when we see Tommy come out of the trees, he runs up to Derek, and Derek is kind of like, "What the fuck is this shit? I'm hearing about you running into Crystal Lake, and, you know, I told you not to go around there. There's weirdos, as you can see, everywhere, and blah, blah, blah." So these three, Tommy, Ted, and Derek all begin to walk home, and back to the Jarvis house, and they take the trail through the trees. And as they're going through the trees, Tommy kind of asked Derek and Ted, he's like, I've heard the stories, all right, but he's 9 years old, so he wants to hear more. He wants to hear the real deal story. So Derek and Ted proceed to tell him the story, which is basically a brief summary of what happened in 1965. Jason, as a young boy, was unattended by the camp counselors at Crystal Lake, and he drowned. And Pamela went off into a psycho revenge-filled rage that led her to kill I don't know how many people, because we don't know that right now. Maybe I'll explain that later. But she killed some fucking teenagers, as we know, right? And then one of them survived, and she killed Pamela. But just the legends, no one knows where exactly the rumors came from, but people say that Jason never drowned, or drowned, you know what I mean. And they also say that he still lives in Crystal Lake. You know, people like Crazy Ralph, and a couple other locals that'll be introduced in the second installment of the series. But as of now, this is really an introduction story, and that's why it's so short. And it's my first project I've ever really attempted to release to anyone, and especially making an audiobook out of it. So yeah, they tell Tommy the story, everything that happened, and then they eventually get back to the Jarvis house, and then the car full of teenagers. Oh wait, I forgot a part. Before Tommy comes up, Before Tommy comes up to Derek and Ted, we're introduced to Sheriff Thomas and Deputy Green. Now, Deputy Green is a bit of a deputy dipshit. The way I wrote him in my head, he's definitely a fucking... If you ever seen the movie No Country for Old Men, he's definitely the deputy. "Oh, Sheriff, we just missed him!" You know, with the fucking milk on the table. That is definitely Deputy Green. And then Sheriff Thomas is definitely... I guess you could say he's the Tommy Lee Jones character. I had those two in mind from No Country for Old Men. So we're introduced to these two, and you know, Derek's hand is bleeding and shit, and he asks the cops ask him, "What the fuck happened to your hand? You guys are causing trouble, blah blah blah." And they're like, "No, we're not causing trouble." And the sheriff tells him, "Look, just because I fought with your father doesn't mean I won't grill your ass for good." Now, this is implying, for those of you who didn't understand that, this is implying that Sheriff Thomas and Jarvis Sr., which we'll be introduced to later on, they fought together in Vietnam, which is Derek and Tommy's dad, obviously. So they have a bit of a relationship there. But he says, you know, "You got lucky last time, but this time you better keep your nose clean or I'll put you away for good." And Derek's just kind of like, "Whatever, you know, I'm a cocky asshole," and so's Ted, and the deputy's a dipshit. So that's just a quick introduction to those characters, is why I threw that little scene in there. So now we're back to Derek and Ted explaining to Tommy the, the story of the whole Friday the 13th story, which is Pamela, Jason, the 65 incident, whatever. And then we get back to the 5 kids, the teenagers, who eventually arrive at Crystal Lake. And I think right there is where we're going to end this video, because this is going to be a 2-part breakdown. So I'll break down the rest of the story in the next video. So for now, turn on the bell notifications, like and subscribe, go like my Facebook page. I'll be moving up to other platforms here soon, and I have a new project that I just kind of gave birth to, fresh out of my mind, so I'm going to start putting that together pretty quick, like as quick as I can, so I can give it to you guys to, listen to and stuff. But yeah, that was part 1. That was the introduction and part 1. So part 2 is called Camp Blood, and we'll get into Camp Blood, and then part 3, part 4, and the last part, of course, part 5. So stay tuned for those. They'll be coming pretty soon. This has been Blackheart Productions. As always, I'm Chase. I'll see you freaks and fucking geeks later.